Nice. This is amazing. Hello. Hi, everyone. Some people are still getting settled, but I'm glad you all are here. We'll give you all a few moments to just sit down, find a comfortable seat, and then we'll get started. Very cool. Are we all good? Can you all hear me? Sounds okay? Awesome. Thank you. So my name is Mario Peña. I'm one of the partners of Able City. I'm happy to welcome you all to this round of our community engagement and really to get into a very important part of this project, which is where we have really done a whole lot to think about what we've heard the last few months from everyone and put something that begins to look like a concrete series of options for you to give us even more feedback. Again, so we're focusing on getting all the feedback we possibly can so that at the end we are collecting all of the positive elements of the options you'll see here today. All right, so before we get to that, I'll go through a little bit of logistics for today. So we have simultaneous translation, and he's getting set up back here. ¿Quién necesita traductor en español? ¿Alguien necesita traducción en español simultánea? ¿Bien? ¿Todo el mundo? ¿Está bien? Okay. And if you need us to slow down, translate on the fly, we can do that too. Just raise your hand. So it's important that you get all the detail here. There'll be a lot of detail to go through, so don't be afraid to ask along the way. We have a sign-in photo release forms somewhere. I think everyone, as you walked in, were given those photo release forms. Everyone go through that process? We're good? I think we collected everybody.
We can get a red dot.
Oh, right, yes. So did anybody ask? Yes, so we've got a few people with a red dot. We will make sure you're not online. You need a red dot here, ma'am? Yeah, okay, can we get her a red dot, please? You want to say something? Okay, all right, good. All right, great. Okay, so we have some really good food, tacos in the back. I'm sure you all have sort of migrated to that table in the back, but in case you haven't, they're back there. They're really good. They're from Birrotes Tortas Ahogadas. We have kids' activities in the back. I don't see any kids. I see a couple of kids here, but happy to have him here. But if he's bored or whatever, you know, he can go back there and then come back if he wants. Restrooms. Help me out with the restrooms. The restrooms are back there and to the left. There you go. Our exits. We've got a couple of emergency exits behind me or the main exit in the back. All right, so we're all wearing masks. You don't have to, but they're highly encouraged. Yeah, we have some free masks. Thank you. All right, so just quick introduction so you know who's here from our team, who you can ask questions to. So first and foremost, our CEO for Opportunity Home is here. Irene Hosa, thanks for joining us. He's here for a few minutes. Thank you, Ed, for being here. Seema, our project manager and design lead, is here next to me. Trent from Alamo Architects, he'll be helping here with explaining the options that we've put together. Paola, our community engagement coordinator, is out here. Lorena is back there. Hi, Lorena. Diana, another Able City partner, back here. Laura, back there. Who am I missing? I think we're... Sorry?
Right here.
Christian. Yes, Christian. And Anna. Thank you. All right, cool. So we'll all be huddling up with you all later as we have a more detailed discussion about what you'll hear. All right. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Seema. She has been working very hard on getting this event together, and I'm excited to share with you. So, Seema.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're really excited to share our updates with you and get more feedback as we develop more detail. I'm going to do kind of a quick overview of the process. So, we're all kind of on the same page about what's been talked about so far and sort of what are the parameters that we're working within for the design. So first of all, I think we could start with the question of what is a master plan? It's really a vision. It isn't an architectural set of drawings where we get into the weeds about, specifics of the buildings. It's really, us coming together to develop a vision for the future so that we can make those decisions based on a clear understanding of, what the community wants to see and how we want to make change in the future. So really, we're developing that concept design. We're developing some early ideas about funding strategies, how we're going to bring the project to fruition. And that's what kind of encapsulates the master plan. Once we've developed that and we've all sort of come together around that, then the next step will be that Opportunity Home will, go out and find that architect who's going to do the technical drawings, and then we'll move into construction. So really we're thinking about that first concept stage, that vision stage. So here's a little bit of the timeline of where we've been. We started this process in February. We started with a lot of learning and listening, went out to community events, went door to door at Alazan, hosted a series of resident and community committee meetings, really just to understand what the community wants, what the residents want, what are the issues, what are the needs, what are the best ways to engage folks. And then we moved into design and visioning. So we started to kind of think about, well, what are the priorities? What should this master plan be defined by? And then we kind of took a little bit of a break over the summer and came up with some initial proposals. So now we're in that kind of evaluation and feedback phase. So we're going to ask you all to take a look at the proposals. We have some sort of questions about the master plan that we need your feedback from. And then we'll sort of move into the final master plan version. And then in phase 4, kind of come to that final decision and, hopefully celebrate together that we've come to an end result that we're all happy with, and that you all are excited about how we're going to move the master plan into the future. So really just to start, when we started the project at the way beginning, these were the kind of pillar commitments that came from Opportunity Home as they started this project. One is to maintain all of Alazan Courts as public housing. So that's a really important component. So, instead of, other schemes, other past projects considered the possibility of mixing incomes, changing the rents at which people could live here. That was scrapped, and we're really, really focusing on maintaining Alazan as public housing, and that the income mix, the rental rates will stay the same. It will serve the same population as Alazan Courts serves today. Another commitment was that we're going to retain at least 501 units. So, Alazan is going to serve the same number of people as it does today, and all of those 501 units will stay public housing. And then the third commitment is that there's going to be no displacement from the neighborhood. So, over time, when we get into construction, there probably going to be the need for people to be temporarily relocated, whether we're doing new construction or rehabilitation of the existing buildings. People are most likely not going to be able to live through that in their units, but we're going to work out a phasing system so that people can be relocated to other Opportunity Home units and homes on the near west side. So it won't be dispersed across the city, but really focused on a phasing plan where people can stay in their community, and then really be invited back once the new project is complete. In terms of, as, from a technical standpoint, these are some of the project requirements that really are shaping the design. We know that the buildings are old. They were built in 1939. So no matter what happens,
It's all relative, they're not.
they do need to be upgraded. There are a lot of problems in terms of the building systems. They need new insulation, they need new windows. So no matter what path we take for any particular home, whether it's new construction or rehabbing an existing building, all the units will be upgraded to modern building standards. So that's new plumbing, new electrical, everything we need to make sure that these homes will last 50, 100 years into the future. We know that we need to improve the handicap accessibility throughout Alazan courts, increase the number of units that are ADA accessible, increase the accessibility of the site. So that's really an important requirement, both from a regulatory standpoint, but it's one of the concerns that we've heard a lot from residents, and it's been a big priority. And then the other thing we need to do is increase the unit sizes. So currently, the units are about 30% smaller than is typical today. So it's another regulation that we need to upgrade and increase the unit sizes so that a 350 square foot studio needs to turn into a 500 square foot studio. So that's kind of something that's going to shape on the design development. It will shape how we can reuse existing buildings and what we need to do building new buildings. Throughout our learning and listening, we've kind of identified these as kind of core community priorities. This is what we've heard from you, what we've heard from residents, the hundreds of touch points and conversations we've had. There's really, you all have asked us to focus on improving streets and green space, preserving the look and feel of the neighborhood. This is both preserving the buildings, but also, preserving the scale and the quality of the neighborhood. That there's, every unit has a front door that accesses the street, and keeping the character of the neighborhood. And there's also been a lot of desire for, how are we thinking about the need in this community and citywide. So kind of, is it possible to increase the number of public housing units that Alazan Courts is offering? So those are kind of three different focus areas that have been kind of raised up as key priorities. Some of the design challenges. So one is the floodplain. So we're right up against Alazan Creek. With climate change and changing development patterns throughout the city, there is the FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, is currently redrawing their maps, and that line of where the 100-year floodplain is going to move. And currently, under all of the existing regulations, we're not allowed to build or do any substantial renovation within that area. And so we need to plan for, potentially the buildings that exist in that area will most likely get demolished, and we'll have to shift those units elsewhere in Alazan Courts. There's also, we're thinking about the changing need. Right now, Opportunity Homes wait list really has a great demand for smaller units, efficiencies, one bedrooms, often for elderly folks that that are single or two-person households. So we're thinking about how should Alazan Courts respond to that need. So that's one of those kind of design challenges that we're thinking about. And then we're also, we're going to need to reconfigure the units. So the existing buildings, the units are too small. They're about 30% too small. So, we said, hey, we can use the existing buildings, but we'll have to be creative about it. So maybe a building that had 4 units in it previously will only have 3 units in it. So every unit can get bigger. But then we have that one unit that we need to find a new location for. So that's another thing, trying to figure out, how we can maintain that minimum of 501 units. And then how to fit it in the existing buildings, and then what do we need to add in order to make up for that square footage that we lost. So kind of just to dig into a little bit of that question of the housing need. And I apologize if this is a little small. I can kind of explain in a little more detail. So currently at Alazan Courts, there is a majority of 2-bedroom units. 82% of the units at Alazan Courts are 2 bedrooms. And that really defines the character of the neighborhood. It's a lot of smaller families. There are a lot of young kids at Alazan Courts, and that's really defined by the fact that, the unit size, there's not a lot of those smaller units, there's not a lot of the bigger units, and so Alazan Courts is defined by that today. And then you can see in the second graph, that pink bar is Opportunities Homes wait list. So currently there's a high demand for those smaller units. And there's also, a greater demand for, 3-bedroom units and 4 or 5-bedroom units. So initially, when we started the design, we needed to find a starting place. And so we said, hey, why don't we try and find a balance between what Alazan Courts has today and what the need is in the city, so that we're responding to the current needs and not what the needs were in 1939. So for the starting point for our design options, we decided to move forward with increasing the number of 1-bedrooms, decreasing the number of 2-bedrooms, and kind of keeping the 3 bedrooms the same. In our initial feedback from last week, when we met with our committees, I think there was concern about that. So this is something that's flexible and that we can adjust in our next phase of design development. So this is something that we can talk about today. We're going to break out into small groups. We are proposing maybe an alternate mix where we shift, instead of shifting 2 bedrooms down to 1 bedrooms, we actually shift some of those 2 bedrooms to meet the need for 3 and 4 bedrooms, because that's another need in the community. So we can talk about this in greater detail. I know it's a kind of a complicated subject, so we're going to break out into small groups at the end of the presentation, and so I'd love to we would all love to hear your thoughts about that, and really get your feedback about what's the right mix of 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, 1 bedrooms, efficiencies, in order to, both meet the needs of the community and then also maintain the character and the feel of Alazan Courts. So those are kind of the overarching things that we're thinking about with the design. And so then, thinking about those things, we started looking at the actual buildings, looking at the site. And we have, we had a goal of developing 4 different design options. So when we're thinking about that design, we needed to solve for this kind of challenge. We We had those 501 units. There's some units that are in the floodplain, so we need to accommodate for the fact that we're going to need to relocate those units. And then we also, those units that we had to reconfigure and make bigger, we lost some units there. So of those 501 units of the existing Alazan courts, in the future, those buildings could accommodate 337 new units. So those new units are bigger and they're not in the floodplain. So that's, of the existing buildings that we have, that's how many units we'd be able to maintain. So that means to get back to that 501 number, we would need to we need to add back 240 units. And this was something that, the folks who were here at the last meeting on June 25th, that was kind of what we played with the Lego exercise. We said, we have the existing buildings. We need to add, they were all in tan. We needed to add all of those orange units back into Alazan courts. And there's one little kind of additional piece here. So we also said that we made a commitment as we were starting this design that in addition to thinking about those 501 units, we wanted to make sure that we were serving the same number of people. So we wanted to make sure that not only did we have the same number of units that exist in Alazan courts, we want to have the same number of bedrooms. So if we had a 2-bedroom unit that we shifted down to a 1-bedroom, we would need to increase the number of units so that we could maintain the number of bedrooms. So another complicated thing we can talk about in the small groups. So really, we kind of, all of the design options use this as a starting point. Yeah, Graciela.
So it goes, you talked about 501 units and now it's 337, so the difference is all of those that are in the floodplain?
The difference is the units that are in the floodplain, the units we lost because we reconfigured. So in the last one, so we lost 74 units because of the floodplain, and then we lost 80 units because we had to reconfigure and make the units in the existing existing buildings bigger.
But then the next question is, and now we're with the, go to the next slide.
Oops.
So now we're going from 562 bedrooms to 982? Almost doubling?
Yeah, so in order for so 501 units at Alazan Courts today has 979 bedrooms. So we said in the final design, we want to make sure that there are 979 bedrooms. At the mix that we used for the design options, we would need 577 units to achieve that. If we decide on a different mix, we did more 3 bedrooms, more 4 bedrooms, we wouldn't need as many units because we would still be matching what's there today. So it's all this like complicated puzzle of everything shifting up and down. So none of those things are set in stone, and we really need your feedback in order to determine what the best solution is. All right, did I lose anyone on that? Are there any questions? We will get into small group discussions, and we can kind of dig into some of these concepts in a little more detail.
Can I just add a comment on that? Mm-hmm. So even if the mix...
I'll let you pull it out.
That is hard. Hello?
Turn it on.
So even if the mix changes, even drastically, the problem of we've got to find more land for these units that we're losing is still in play, and it's still significant. So if we build a bunch of 4-bedrooms, this number is going to decrease by some percentage, but it's not enough for us not to have this design problem to achieve today, right? So that's where, so we're just starting from that number, but it's still the same exercise. It's still very valuable to us. Go ahead.
No, oh, she's,
Oh, sorry.
yeah,
Sure.
I think there's also a question from Leticia.
Sorry. So on the point of relocation assistance, when this project happens, the date that you're going to begin the project, and you stated you're going to give the residents vouchers, I suppose, for relocation assistance, I have two questions on that. What accountability will the Opportunity Home case handlers have to make sure that these vouchers that you're going to give out is designated for Alazan residents, or are they going to be utilized by other agencies like NHSD or, other agencies in San Antonio to help with Opportunity Home relocation on other units? That's my one question. But also, what are you going to do when you give these vouchers to the Alazan residents? Because currently, anyone, anywhere on Opportunity Home vouchers, they cannot find another place to go. I do work for a nonprofit agency in evictions, and it's a struggle to try to find relocation housing with a voucher. So are you taking that into consideration? And what are you going to do when they cannot find housing by the deadline when you start your project?
Yeah, so we're going to be working through the phasing so that anyone who needs to be relocated from an Alazan Courts home, there will be a vacancy in an Opportunity Home community on the near west side. So at Apache Courts, at Guadalupe Homes. So they won't, so they'll have an opportunity to move into another Opportunity Home unit. They will also be given the opportunity to take a voucher, but they won't be required to take a voucher. So we won't do construction so fast. We won't be asking so many people to relocate at one time that there aren't enough, it's going to be a match, that there'll be enough vacancies in near west side properties to ensure that everyone will have an opportunity to stay in the neighborhood and given an opportunity to move to another Opportunity Home home on the near west side.
So how is that possible if currently we're unable to house people currently? So how is that a full floor plan? Or is it all of this is just full floor moving across? Because currently people are not being able to place.
We'll work through the phasing so that there'll be enough time that vacancies will accumulate. So there'll be a little bit of time where there might be some vacancies at Apache Homes or Guadalupe Homes, so that when the construction starts, that we will be able to move people in there. But that is, it's part of the commitment that Opportunity Home has made, that we're not just sort of saying, here's a voucher, good luck, but that we're actually accommodating for where those residents are going to go, and then also making sure that they get invited back to Alazan Courts so that they have an opportunity to maintain, to live in that community again.
It's our job in this project to plan for that specific transfer and then transfer back. So just as an example, yes, we could sort of reserve vacancies in the nearby homes for Alazan residents, but also there will be probably new buildings of substantial size that are built first, where Alazan residents can move into that new Alazan building first. Their homes get remodeled and then they move back. So that's another method. So all of these tools are in our tool chest to make sure that this is a reality. It's a commitment and it's a reality. It's not wishing, it's planning. And so we're planning for that.
Do you have a backup plan in the event that it doesn't go accordingly?
Do I have a backup plan? Well, the
What if I live at Alazan?
Mhm.
And I do exactly as I'm being told, and I follow instructions, and then all of a sudden I fell through the cracks because my case handler got fired or found another job or what have you.
Sure, sure.
All communications with, is there a backup plan for me that I fell through the cracks?
No, well, I understand. So we're making sure that physically all of the vacancies and homes are there to take in people. Operationally, if there's something that is going on, then I would want the help of Opportunity Home to handle that one because it's an operational question and it's not a design question. So I guess they can chime in, or we can talk to you afterwards and just make sure that all of the things you're telling us that we're all thinking about, and I'm sure they are. Right. Okay.
Leticia has a question over here. She actually had her first, had her first question. Okay.
I just want to make sure, there's 501 units of residents in Alazan.
Yes.
Make sure that they're not going to be displaced in any way. They're going to have an option to stay in public housing or obtain a Section 8 voucher.
Yes.
A lot of times, like she states, that it's difficult for them to find housing out there. They have to look at the payment standards. If those payment standards have not been revised or looked at by SAHA, which is the HUD regulation that they have to do it, it's not compatible with the market, and it's going to make it difficult for them to find anything. The second thing is, let's see, the payment standards, making sure that those families are not displaced. And what are we looking at? What is the target for the bedroom? Is it 982 or, okay, and all those within the 501 units. I think that's what's really confusing. No.
It's 980, sorry. So it's 982 bedrooms exist. And if we shift the mix of 1 bedroom, 4 bedrooms, no matter what, we won't go below 982. Because it's sort of a higher bar than the promise of 501 units, because we could have just replaced 501 units with 1-bedroom units, but you're serving less people. So if we just convert the Alazan numbers to bedrooms, then we're making sure that we're serving the same amount of people.
Consideration of the extension of the 30% of the
Exactly, yes. Which is why we need more places. That's what the design exercise is about. We need more places to build more new structures, no matter what we do. Right, yeah.
Hi, my name's Leticia Vela, and I am interested. I do not live in the courts. I was born in the courts, so that's my my connection. And I did do a history of the courts, and so I was a presenter at the very first one of these meetings. And I think I've kind of come to the conclusion that my interest in this project is in the design area. And it's not specifically in the housing area, but in the fact that I don't want to see the level of community that occurred from the onset of this project. I don't want to see the sense of community destroyed by a new iteration of this project. So I'm concerned about keeping public spaces, that includes green spaces, so that people can gather, can have their birthday parties, can do things as a community, because I think that's important culturally, but it's also important for our ability to help one another within the community. So I wanted to talk today because there's been very little said about that floodplain, and while those units will not be available for housing, potentially, and most likely, they will not be available for housing. I believe they can be saved for community use. And so I don't want to go forward with the foregone conclusion that all of those units in the floodplain have to be demolished, because we can use those for types of, community gathering spaces, a teen unit that they can go in and play video games and do crafts and do stuff that will, because a lot of the people in this community, a lot of the children are raised in single-family homes. They can have a place to go and be safe and learn and grow in a healthy way. So I'm asking right now to stop thinking with a foregone conclusion that those floodplain units have to be demolished, because I don't support that belief. And I just want you guys to start opening your minds to consider it. And I don't think that Saha, this new name, whatever, is going to want the upkeep and they're not going to be able to provide the programs, but as community we can. That was what was done when they first started. We brought, and my article talks about how the first driver's license, we taught people in the community the book to get their driver's license, because at that time none of us were driving. And so we did that in Spanish. That was one of the historic projects that went on in this community, is we taught the book, the driver's ed book in Spanish for our community. So there's a lot of need in this community, and I don't want to see those units demolished if we can use them for some of the needs that we have today.
Thank you, Leticia, for that comment. I think in the design options, we do explore, how we can use that space, providing green space, new parks, so that we can create community space, so we can get, as we talk about.
That's part of demolishing the buildings, and that's what I'm saying, stop, because that hasn't been something that we've discussed or agreed to in any of these meetings.
Sure. Well, so the permitting process that we have is, we don't have to demolish them, but if we substantially renovate them, then you don't have the ability to use them. Like, you can't repurpose them with substantial remodeling within the city rules at the moment, because they fall within the floodplain. So you're absolutely right, they don't have to be demolished, but if we touch them with substantial renovation, then that triggers that loss of use.
But not for housing?
No, for any building, for any occupation where a human being is like inhabiting that space, it falls out of being able to be permitted.
Not living in that space.
For any use.
Yeah.
Any use. If we do more than paint job and that kind of stuff, then we fall out of the ability to use them under the city code today. You're right. Yes.
Why demolish them? If a community member that's from Alazan Floods is asking you not to demolish those buildings just because they're in a floodplain, then why do you have to demolish them at all? You're saying that you're going to fall out of the guidelines if you touch them in any way. So then just don't touch them. Just leave them there, because you've got a community member from there asking you not to demolish them. So just don't touch them.
Agreed. That is an option on the table. There's a community member and so all of the options are valid here. But there are other voices in the room that might have other conversations to have about this use. And so we want to hear from everybody. And that's why we want to break up into groups, to make sure people have the ability to voice their opinion as well. So, but they're all valid, and you're right. An option is not to touch them, and that's valid.
Can
Yeah,
I
sure.
actually just move us on, and we'll get into some conversation in the small groups. We'll just, Trent is going to share the design options with us, and then we can break out, and there'll be a facilitator at each of the tables to to get into more conversation. All right.
I kind of want to hear, she's a resident. I think everybody else is.
Sure. Okay.
Well, I mean, there's specific reasons to have these conversations where everyone can hear, because when you have the facilitators at each of the tables, it's not something that everyone in the room is hearing. It's a conversation in a small group. I just wanted to, first of all, say, you know, she's right. Every single meeting we've had, we've said, we don't want them demolished. We don't want them demolished. There's apartments across the street that are so-called not in the floodplain, or they're built a different way, or they have a thicker foundation. There's got to be a way around it. Simply ignoring us is not going to fix anything. And that's what has been happening progressively. Each meeting, more presentations that are outside what we are asking for. As far as the displacement of residents, this plan is the same plan we heard from NRP Group. It's the same plan that brought us to the fight. It's the same plan. We're going to move people. First, if you're going to move people and you're going to move them back and you're going to give 100% guarantee that every single resident can come back, you cannot change the bedroom size and apartment size like that, because it does not allow them to come back. It changes it from a family property to an mostly elderly and disabled property, or mostly single-person property. This is a family property, it is a community property, and it is a huge loss to this community to lose the families, the kids. The schools will suffer, the community businesses will suffer, and our lives will suffer. Our kids are everything. And there's a lot of individuals whose kids have grown up and gone away, or they don't have kids. Everybody knows my kids. They all love them. I mean, tables and tables of people. We share our kids. We raise our kids together. That's part of what makes us a community. And we don't need to lose those families. Section 8 vouchers, I have a huge problem with switching from public housing to Section 8, because there are already so many people with Section 8 vouchers that can't find housing. So how many people are you going to put at the back of the list who have their voucher in their hand when you're trying to switch people from public housing, which is a much better program, to Section 8? And no one is explaining to these tenants, if you take this voucher, you lose your public housing protections. You are no longer protected in the same way. There are different regulations, there are different rules, and then when that one-year lease is up, it's up. If that person no longer wants to accept vouchers, then you have to move again, and you're displaced again. And somebody needs to be explaining that, if they're giving that as an option.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've had that. I was told not to stand right in front of the speaker. We've had that conversation about Section 8 vouchers versus public housing in that displacement policy with Opportunity Home. And I think there is going to be education about that. That is a concern. And, you know, that switch from going from a public housing unit to a Section 8 unit is a challenge, and it's not going to be required. It will be given as an option with that education that, you know, it is a different standard, and you know, you are at a higher risk if you take that than having the security of being in public housing. So that's, I think, going to be very much part of the discussion in that phasing plan. In terms of the number of units and the family orientation of Alazan courts, I think we heard you all loud and clear on last week, and you know, I think when we made that switch to having more one-bedroom units and efficiencies in this first iteration, you know, maybe that was the wrong direction to go, and we need to maintain those larger units and maybe increase the bedroom sizes so that we can have more variety of families. So that's definitely something that we're, you know, want to take your feedback on. And then I guess the last point about the floodplain is, you know, we have to work within the regulations of the city. You know, if we're not going to be able to get a building permit, that building isn't going to be, like, it's not going to be a community asset either as housing or a community center. So we, you know, there's some things, you know, we can fight for, we can try and find, you know, creative solutions around, but at the end of the day, you know, we want to take your feedback, but we also need to make a project that's feasible. So yeah, it's I mean, we've heard you, and we're going to try and you know, save as many buildings in the floodplain within what we have at our disposal. But at a certain point, there are going to be some things that we can't propose because they're not legal. So I'm sorry that you if you feel like we're not listening, but there's some things that are just kind of outside of the possibility of what we're going to be capable of doing.
But is there no way that we can consider just keeping the units? There's so many people that need housing. They don't, I mean, sell them to the city, but don't destroy them. There are people on the street that need housing. So it seems, it just, for those of us who are working to try to find housing for people, it just, you know, it's one of those things that doesn't make any sense. It's just, people would rather live there without it being renovated than live on the street. So can that be an option?
I think so. No, like notes like that, creative thinking like that, is welcome for discussion, and so we've got people taking notes, and so that's a suggestion that needs to be vetted against, you know, everybody who's here, and it's a suggestion because if it's so important that the buildings stay in place as is and they're not touched, then we are listening, and we're telling you then we can't fulfill those requirements of making sure that those buildings are complying with modern building standards. They can't get washer dryer. They can't get, you know, they can't have all these things. And as long as you all have the facts, as long as you all have the facts, and then you come back with suggestions like this, then our job is to take them and see if we can work that through. But it's also our job to listen to everybody here, right?
Well, let's listen to the ones that want to demolish.
Sure, go ahead.
Other than the development.
With everything that's going on, because I've been working with TexasHousers.org and also the SAPMC committees. One thing that people need to understand is you know, the city needs to kind of work with the people, and if anything, the people need to let the city know. Wait a second, this, you know, there's things that are being done that it's not legal. As far as the writing of the San Antonio Property Maintenance Code, you know, things that were the wording itself manipulates the reason why the code was there. You know, I know this because I've been in those meetings. With working with TexasHousers.org, we've had over 600 homes be demolished since 2015, single-family homes. Okay, as compared to other big cities where it's like 16 total for all of those big cities. There needs to be a huge outcry from the public to ask, why is this being done? Because that is over 600 single-family homes that they, I mean, maybe they're doing projects with, maybe they're not. But I mean, with that, if you're talking about demolishing, it does not, there's not a substantial justification for it. I had my home be demolished by the city of San Antonio for it being a public nuisance. Okay, I had no citations. I had pretty much no say-so, anything. They just came through and deemed it a public nuisance, and our home got demolished. I helped out over 50 people, and all because of the city code, because of permits, because of what's this, that, or whatever. People need to understand we have the right to speak up.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can I offer something? The The last charrette that we had, one of the things that we talked about, so I'm with SAC, and we bought a property on the floodplain right down the street on Brazos, and we were okay because we have a 6-foot elevation of the foundation. And so in the context of doing other work and other kinds of things, we're okay. One of the conversations we had at the last meeting was that there is a way that you can build on the property, even though it's on a floodplain. It's about probably costs versus anything, but those units can be replaced, and they could be accessible to housing if you put a little bit more money into building them based on the fact that they're on the floodplain, right?
But they need to be demolished and then raised up.
Right.
And you can build the same unit that looks
Right.
exactly the same on the same footprint, but they've got to be out of the floodplain.
Right.
And one caveat to that is right now, and this may change, right? If a building is in the flood zone, we can't get a permit if we do this, right? They need to be out, even if I raise it above the floodplain, right, the level where the water establishes itself, the height of the water, I still can't get a permit because it's inside, right? So that means that when it floods all around it. So,
It should just be an
right,
option similar
right.
to leaving them in place, spending more money.
But I think there's an amendment so that it will be very soon possible to build up and still get a permit. So it is possible, but it can't be the same unit at the same elevation that is in danger of being flooded. That's what we can't promise you, right? Now, what we have seen is that this FEMA line is going to retract. We don't know exactly how much it's going to retract because the official numbers aren't out there, but we expect it to. So it might not be the same number of units we're calculating for here, but there will be some that are absolutely within that floodplain that we can't touch substantially. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not saying we have to demolish them. I'm saying we can't renovate them. And I'll stop right there. Yeah.
I think for those of us who are saying we don't want them demolished, we're saying build all your new buildings and keep those. We have so many people in this city that need to be housed. I think
Right.
that's what people who work in housing are asking.
Sure. Well, there's definitely a need. Absolutely.
Let's go through, we have a couple of options, and then those will probably give us more questions and more conversations. We have a few more minutes left, and I would still like to hear your feedback based on these options.
All right. So Pal is our timekeeper and wants us to move along. So Trent's going to share the different design options, and you'll see different strategies that are starting to think about this whole conversation. And then we'll break up into small group conversations to continue.
Hi, everyone. I'm Trent Tunks. I'm an architect with Alamo Architects, and we've been working closely with Seema and Mario over the past several months on these design schemes that we're here to show you today. And really, these design schemes developed out of the community committee meetings and the input we received from that, as well as some of the ideas and strategies that we saw here in the last community design workshop. There was a lot of different ideas about how to add homes back to the courts, whether they were, so I think, let me back up. The design solution that we're really trying to achieve here with these design schemes is the issue of somehow we need to add 110 units back to the Alazan courts. After, well, we didn't talk about baseball field. Okay, yeah, go ahead and click to it. So one of the ideas that really came out of the community workshop that we had last time was that pretty much all of the tables that had tried to solve this design challenge that we're presented with had looked at trying to put units on the Valero Field baseball field at Apache courts. There were a lot of different ideas about how to put additional homes there, and we took that into consideration to kind of help us kind of get a bit of a relief valve in terms of how do we get the number of units back into Apache and Alazan that we need to get back to. How do we get back that 240 units that we need to add back? So, yeah, here's that design problem. So 240 units, we basically did some design strategies and test fits, and we're able to say we can roughly fit 130 units over on the baseball field at Apache. That leaves us with needing to put 110 units back into Alazan. These are the 240 units that were lost through that reconfiguration and the units that are in the existing floodplain. So if we were to add proposed housing on the Apache baseball field, and we were to put all 240 units there, it would be a massive housing structure, and we don't want to do that. We want to do something that's sensitive to the local context and neighborhood, and we want to do something that's sensitive to the existing housing that's at Apache Courts. So we can fit 130 units there by doing 2-story buildings in the same scale of the existing Apache buildings along the street, and infilling the existing kind of baseball field area with some 3-story buildings tucked back behind those buildings with additional green space in order to get 130 units there. We can definitely look at shifting that number down and around. That's one of the survey questions is, how tall can those buildings at Apache be? If they need to be all 2-story, then we can certainly take that input and feedback and shift this scheme to be in response to that. But it begins to shift the numbers around again. If we go down to 2 stories there, then we have to look at where that additional number of units will have to go. So this was just our first kind of iteration at trying to fit those units onto Apache to create some new housing there as we go through that first phase of the project. So again, coming out of the committee meetings and the last community workshop, we really started here looking at the different ways in which we had gotten feedback about how to distribute green space back into Alazan and how to add units back into Alazan. There were a lot of ideas about putting new homes on the interiors of each block or along Brazos Street, or in some cases even along the existing floodplain line, kind of hugging that line and adding additional homes there. And we also went back to the community priorities. How do we improve green spaces? How do we maintain and preserve the look and feel of the existing neighborhood? And can we add in additional public housing units where we can? So those all served as the basis from which we began to develop certain design concepts. And the 4 schemes you're about to see are concepts that were derived out of those ideas. None of them in any way are set in stone, right? They can all be kind of combined based on what we hear are the ideas that the community finds positive, and shifted based on the ideas that we hear negative responses to. And I think you'll see in some ways we've even done that ourselves. We've combined schemes to try to arrive at solutions that meet the most number of positive solutions that we can. So this first scheme, we call it Maintain the Streets because it tries its hardest to look and maintain and preserve the existing field and neighborhood as possible. It tries to do that by preserving all of the existing street-facing buildings. From an urban design standpoint, it's really that front porch to street condition that really provides a lot of that existing look and feel of the Alazan neighborhood. So in this scheme, we've tried to keep all of the existing 2-story buildings that face the street. And we're only adding new construction to the interiors of the blocks within the footprint of the existing 1-story buildings. By taking those buildings taller, we're able to get in some additional units and get us back closer to the 110 units that we need to put back into Alazan. By also maintaining the streets, we're also able to distribute additional green spaces within the interiors of the blocks themselves. And then I think you'll see in each scheme, this purple box, we're trying to incorporate a placeholder for some form of community hub, some type of community element that helps anchor additional green space along along a park that's near the creek. So in this scheme, even though we're only doing additional construction on the interiors of the blocks, in order to get back to 110 units, which is the goal, right, we had to go and add some additional height. In this scheme, we had to get to 3 stories. So I know we heard a lot of comments in the last community workshop that within the neighborhood plan, construction over 2 stories is not within that plan. So we wanted to be very sensitive with where and how we add any additional building height. So we've already begun to do some sightline studies of how those 3-story buildings would look and feel from the street. And at least in this scheme, given that those 3-story buildings are being added into the place of the footprint of the existing 1-story buildings, they're set far enough back from the street and shielded by the existing 2-story buildings that you really don't see them or feel them from the street. We have heard some comments about and gotten some feedback about additional view corridors at Alazan from streets to downtown and from the courts to the creek, and we can continue to look at those sightline studies if those questions arise and as we begin to look at any place where we might have to add any additional building height. So in the second scheme, which we call Preserve the Core, we said, well, what if we only did the new construction at the edges? What if we only put new buildings along Brazos or along the creek itself and hugged that existing floodplain line? If we were to do that, then we could preserve all of the existing buildings within what we kind of call the core of the neighborhood itself, along the streets and within the interior of the courts. We can do that and maintain a 2-story building height along Brazos. And in this scheme, we're also showing the community element kind of tucked under on the 1st story there along Brazos. That puts it in a really accessible and visible location. And by not touching the core of the courts itself, we're able to distribute a wider variety of activated green spaces into the corners of the existing blocks themselves. Again, though, in this scheme, because we're only touching the edges, to get back to 110 units, we had to look at going to 3 stories somewhere. And we decided to push that back along the creek to tuck it away from neighborhood views and to kind of push it back a little farther away toward the creek. Again, in this scheme, we're kind of also anchoring a neighborhood scale park space back along the existing creek space where we're losing some of those units to the floodplain. So we had scheme 1 where we looked at doing new construction on the interior of the blocks, but had to go to 3 stories, and had scheme 2 where we looked at having to go to the edges, but again had to go to 3 stories. And we really wanted to respond to that comment about building height and maintaining a 2-story building so that we can help keep that neighborhood character. So we said, what if we were to combine those 2 schemes in some ways and do a little bit of editing on the streets and near the creek, but also add some buildings onto the interiors of the courts. And by doing a little bit of both of those schemes, we were able to bring the building height back down to 2 stories. And in addition to that, by adding a few extra buildings, we were actually able to respond to one of the community values of adding additional public housing units. In this scheme, we get 23 additional housing units. Again, kind of in this scheme, you can see how we've incorporated that community hub back toward the creek along a smaller scale neighborhood park with additional green spaces distributed throughout the remaining of blocks. The other positive of this scheme is we are able to maintain as many of the street-facing buildings as possible. So in this last kind of idea, this last scheme, we really wanted to respond to one of the bigger community feedback elements that we've heard, this need for more green space, a desire for places to have people go spend time with their kids and families outside, really rethinking the space along the creek and the space along the floodplain, and really kind of looking at this scheme through the lens of how can we incorporate as much new green space as possible. So by doing some taller buildings along just Brazos, and doing some taller buildings within the interiors of the courts and kind of actually rotating those buildings around, we were able to look at a scheme where we could do a larger scale kind of green space court within each block. And then really by pulling the buildings away from the creek itself, we could really turn that into a neighborhood size park space anchored by a community hub. So there you can see how those buildings along Brazos, they are a little taller. The buildings in the interiors of the courts are a little taller, but the benefit of that is that we can incorporate much bigger scale green spaces. So the other opportunity for us to look for a bit of a relief valve in terms of the number of units that we may have to add back to the courts is finding additional land within the neighborhood itself, finding additional parcels that we could potentially add some units to. That would take down both the number of units that we would have to add to either the baseball field or could incorporate back into Alazan itself.
All right, so now that you've got that quick overview of the schemes, we'd love to break out in those small group conversations. If we could try to consolidate our tables, I think it'll kind of help us have some good conversations. So there kind of be two activities at the tables. Just first of all, just general, please share your thoughts. We'll be taking notes, we'll be engaging, asking you questions. And then we're also, you'll get a copy of the community survey. So we're releasing a survey that asks questions about the different schemes, about what all of these, major questions we've been talking about today. So if you can fill out the survey, as we are in our conversations, we'll collect them all at the end. So, yeah. Okay. So if you can relocate to a table that has a facilitator, the facilitators, if you can raise your hand, maybe. I'll have a table right here. I'll be a table over here.